Hey everyone, Chris here with a quick word before we get started. I hope you really like today's episode where we take a look at procurement and how digitalization is impacting that process with Angeliki Papathanasiou, Head of Operations at Procureship. It's really a fascinating look at something that it does have an impact in our industry in a lot of different ways, and actually emissions and sustainability is one. So please take a listen. Before we get started, and just a reminder, there's a lot of ways to support the show. And one of the biggest ways that you could help is leaving a 5-star rating. Right now, the way I kind of count it, I have about 20 of those, which is great. And I appreciate anyone that gave us a 5-star rating across the various different platforms. But hopefully, if you have a couple of minutes, go ahead, just leave a rating. It's actually not even a couple of minutes. It's a couple of seconds. Just leave a 5-star rating for the show wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple. There's an easy way to do that. Thanks a lot. And now on to the show. Welcome, everyone. You are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. Today's guest is Angeliki Papathanasiou, Head of Operations at Procureship. Procureship provides an efficient connection between shipping companies, ship suppliers, and service providers by offering solutions for the entire maritime procurement cycle. Today, I'm really excited about this chat because we're going to talk about, amongst other things, about the use of AI, specifically in procurement, but of course for AI for vessels. Well, a little bit about how procurement has changed. It's one of the parts of the last dinosaur that is one of the oldest parts. Getting stuff to ships has been around forever and probably won't change. Angeliki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having us, for hosting us today at your podcast. We are really excited to discuss about Procureship products and, of course, our latest developments.
Actually, let's just start off right in there. Let's start off, what's going on? What's the latest happening there? And then give us a little bit of background about the company and about kind of how things have come about.
Sure. So Procureship started operating at the end of 2015, early 2016. The main vision was to optimize the entire procurement lifecycle. The company was created by our CEO, Mr. Grigoris Lambrou, and our COO, Mr. Aris Manasakis. The background they have in shipping and data analytics helped them realize the issue of the traditional procurement methods and, of course, inspired them to create a system that would automate the majority of the daily processes taking place in most of the purchasing departments. Personally, I was involved in other technological projects in different sectors and joined Procureship back in 2017. The company was still in the early stages, since back then we had one shipping company with 100 vessels using the system as a proof of concept. My role today is Head of Operations, as you mentioned, managing the day-to-day operations and the company's business department. Specifically for Procureship, today we have reached more than 1,800 vessels using our system daily for their purchasing activities, while we have registered over 6,500 suppliers and service providers in all major markets and ports globally. Besides our main office in Athens, during 2023, we opened 2 new offices, one in Copenhagen and one in Singapore, to further expand our sales and operational activities in these crucial areas for the maritime sector. We believe that this development is a result of our constant effort to improve our products by using the latest technologies and to create powerful features. The main feature of Procureship is the purchasing platform. The purchasing platform is actually automating the manual work and optimizes the daily activities of the purchasing teams, saving time and allowing to invest this time in other demanding procurement processes. The platform also offers a direct access to vetted marketplace of suppliers worldwide, as well as a recommendation engine that leverages the trading history of both suppliers and buyers and suggests the most relevant suppliers or service providers for every case. Besides our main features, and as our goal is to create constantly new automations for other processes, we have developed supplementary modules such as the invoicing and the IHM maintenance. And of course, during 2024, we're planning to have a full version of our freight forwarding feature for all of our buyers that would like to use it. And just to close this intro, I would like to further elaborate on the IHM feature that I mentioned. It's the inventory of hazardous materials maintenance module. We have created this feature in order to assist suppliers and buyers to comply with the relevant IHM regulations adopted by IMO 2. So by using Procureship, the dashboard that we offer to the shipping companies, the companies could effortlessly monitor, review, and access their IHM documents anytime. Suppliers at the same time can submit respective documents with just a few clicks. And they also have the option to use forms that are verified by BV for Procureship. This IHM feature ensures that the users are fully compliant with relevant regulations, while it is a very good example, I think, of how the automation provided by our system has improved the challenging issue for the maritime companies.
From your start personally in 2017, so a couple of years into the advent of the company, and starting with, like you said, 100 ships, one company, and now you're several times fold that, and probably scaling up as you put these new features out there and these new product lines. What would you say is one of the biggest changes in the way you guys have done business or your approach? Have you, and that's what I hear a lot of times, sometimes when you have a product, especially a digital product, you set out like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then you realize what they call the product market fit becomes, well, we could do some of that, but we really need to focus on a slightly different area. Have you guys explored that, or have you felt the initial thesis that you had has pretty much stayed the same?
Yeah, I would say that generally technology brought numerous changes and improvements in the procurement sector, procurement processes that we are also monitoring from our side. So in the past years, we have also seen a great interest from companies, even the more traditional ones, to automate and digitize their internal processes. It is safe to say that the shipping companies are really looking to adapt new automated procedures, while at the same time they wish to reduce as much as possible the manual work and all the necessary action. So we feel that we are really focusing on our product line. We want our products to be dynamic. We want to hear the market, and this is what we are usually following. This was one of the mentality we had when we started Procureship and when I also joined Procureship. And this is the way that we are still moving. We hear the product, we hear the users, and we concentrate on this.
I know that one of the more challenging things from any digital company is to kind of maybe not pivot, but you got to listen to clients, but then sometimes if you listen too much, you come off of your strategy. So you kind of have to have that balance for sure. Talk to me a little bit about one of the things you also mentioned in some of the pre-chat. We talk a little bit about AI and other types of that sort of thing. A lot of focus on it right now. Everybody also gets a little bit nervous. Talk to me a little bit about how you're implementing that. I would imagine that maybe some of matching what you used to do in the past and making suggestions. Maybe you use AI. Talk a little bit about how you're doing that now.
So yeah, AI technology is, I think, generally changing procurement by making the daily tasks easier and faster to process. Procureship is using machine learning, NLP classification, and other AI techniques that have been optimized in-house. And we would say that by using our AI features, our users can improve their operational efficiency up to 60%. More specifically, we use machine learning in a couple of our processes to enhance the daily usage of the system. One of them is the recommendation engine that we have also mentioned earlier. We have the option to auto-recommend related suppliers. We have employed a machine learning algorithm using a critical statistical model to automatically assign a relevant score and recommend and selected suppliers to the user. And this option helps users to increase the competition per RFQ and receive more competitive offers to evaluate. And this is only one feature where we use the AI. We also use machine learning to forecast the estimated response time of suppliers in RFQs and mention to the user if this is something delayed or normal. And this allows this will allow the purchasers to make proper follow-up actions and be able to monitor their daily workflow. And of course, finally, we have implemented machine learning on our invoicing feature, a very dynamic feature. Through the invoicing feature, we have transformed the current invoice practices into a digitized process. We use complex machine learning capabilities. More specifically, we use a deep learning algorithm identifying invoice items within thousands of invoices and automatically matches these items between them. The users are also able to receive notification when an invoice is matched. And we also automatically highlight the discrepancies for easier invoice checking. As you understand, this leads to a reduction of processing time needed and, of course, a mitigation of the human errors.
So the question that I have, and that I know we talk a lot about, is you go into a company, you say the words AI, MI, and people start to get really nervous. Talk a little bit, because it sounds like you guys have a pretty great, pretty interesting solution that could save time, and it sounds great. But the practicality sometimes of especially, as you say, of dealing with traditional owners, they have been doing it a certain way. They've been for a long time, right? There are people who've probably been in the procurement spot for 20, 30 years. They come in, their ships are fully stocked with whether it's spare part or food or anything along the price of the cycle. And now you're kind of telling them, well, we can, help you. What is the reaction? And I think that's, the name of this podcast, tongue in cheek, is The Last Dinosaur. A part of The Last Dinosaur is the adoption of technology for a myriad of reasons, and one of which is people don't want to adopt. Talk to me about your experiences when you are talking to clients about this, whether it's in a formal setting, like you're assisting with a sale, or you're going to visit a client, or an informal setting, you tell people what you're going to do, and they look at you like, no way, I'm going to be out of a job. Talk to me a little bit about that reaction, and how do you talk to them about that? And what is the reaction? I want to know what is the initial reaction. I'm curious about that the most.
Okay, let's start. I think that on a general level, we can all seem to say that the digital transformation is empowering companies now to adapt to the new technological era. And I think that as the main focus in procurement concentrates now in cost reduction, efficiency, and sustainability, the urgent need to change the traditional practices seems to have been recognized by all the users. So I would say that our main feedback and experience comes from the users that are occupied at the offices of the shipping companies, such as the purchasing, technical, invoice taking, or accounting. We are really happy because we feel that most of the users have been adjusted to the new digitized processes, and they seem to understand that they need to adapt new technologies, as this would lead them to automation and streamlined processes. And we're also pleased because the users, both our buyers and our suppliers, are treating us like their partners, and they are always communicating to us new ideas for new features or improvements that could be developed by our team and may replace some of their traditional manual processes. Of course, let me point out that as the procurement process becomes more digitized, we always have in mind, and we want to point out this, that shipping should continue to be an industry driven by people. So we always start our conversation based on this. And I feel that the way that we try to explain to the users is really simple. We will not further elaborate on explaining how we created the algorithms or how we're exactly using AI. If they're interested, of course, we're happy to open, but we try mostly to focus on how our tools will help them on a daily basis. And I would say that they are now really open to hear us and cooperate and try them. So we're happy for that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it is a little bit of a shift for everything, right? Not just in our business, but in all businesses, because, you know, everybody's fearful that technology is going to replace them. And I think one of the things that I heard early on in this podcast, and we talked before we started about the interesting people that you meet along the way, and especially doing this sort of thing, that I find that's super interesting is people say, well, listen, we have an AI or an MI technology. The role is not to replace the person, but to keep the human in the loop and allow them to make higher level decisions. So not to have somebody, let's say, transcribe an invoice from one format to another, or have to say, oh, I have to make this phone call, but maybe some of these things are automated, or at least the amount of manual work is reduced, allowing the person who's paid to find efficiencies in procurement, let's say, or sustainability of that, to do that a little bit better. And I think that that's one of the things, as we see AI in other sectors, even AI, like if now chat, put in a Google search, it's enabled in certain areas. Even in having those sort of things, you can see it. I think as people see it outside of their work and in their personal life, maybe booking a car, booking a flight, or whatever, I have a feeling that this will become more easily adopted over time.
Yes, I agree. And of course, as you mentioned, and I mentioned earlier today, I think this things should go together. So we will need to use machine learning techniques for our efficiency and to assist the users, assist companies, assist people to go further. But of course, always all the action should be driven by people. That's what I believe.
The procurement, even though it's somebody shoreside doing things, it impacts the ship. Talk to me a little bit about the procurement process, just in general, and the seafarers. And, what's your take on kind of what you guys are trying to do and what the industry is trying to do with digitization, specifically around the procurement process and the seafarers? Because to me, and I spent a short time at sea compared to a lot of people, only about 4 years. I was a deck officer, so procurement was making sure that, if we needed the spare part, it came on board. If we had the fresh fruit, well, we always had fresh fruit. I was lucky I was US flag. It was, I could just go to the grocery store if I wanted to, so, but talk a little bit about like your product and the active procurement within the digital sphere, but then also keeping an eye on the mariners.
In recent years, the procurement process is becoming more cost-effective, increasing the need for the tools that could provide accurate real-time data, reporting, all for reviewing purposes and supply recommendation. And this is obvious on a daily basis, as the users, as you mentioned, the users from the shipping companies are showing a deeper involvement in reaching us and analyzing the trading history. And to achieve also cost saving, they are willing to expand their database by establishing new collaborations and by trying new services or new vendors while negotiating the current agreements they have. And also at the same time, suppliers are showing a positive turnaround towards digitization and the online solutions that are offered nowadays. They're making sure to adapt to new cooperation models implemented by the shipping companies, and they anticipate also from their side to benefit from the technological process and participate in the global wider marketplace with more opportunities. Regarding, you asked regarding the mariners and the crew, the seafarers. Lately, I would say, although we usually cooperate with the purchasers or users from accounting, etc., lately the companies have started engaging also the crew to use Procureship. We have several processes where we are in contact with the crew, for example, to update the inventory of hazardous materials or to create RFQs directly from the vessel. And we noticed a significant turn and adaptability, I would say, to digitization. I guess that now that most of the companies are trying also to provide a stable network to their vessels so they can be online during their route, the mariners will adjust accordingly and pursue an overall technological update in different aspects of the daily activities. Of course, sometimes we need to further explain some of the daily processes that need to be followed, but I would say that the cooperation is constructive and they are open to hear us and open to cooperate and collaborate with us.
I think that's really interesting. I didn't even think about the mariners kind of updating and doing that. And maybe they could say, oh, we want this type of fruit and not that type, and do those other things. But certainly the hazardous material end of it, instead of them having to update the ship manager, having to update, it could be done a little bit more real time. And I think the important point that you made, brings up 2 points that I kind of hear a lot about. The more stress for the mariners. So if they're responsible for doing this could be another stressor for them. But at the same time, I think you're right. I think there is an embrace, especially as we want to attract younger folks within the industry. They're used to doing this sort of thing. So updating a database or documentation for something, rather than having to sending it separately and then having somebody else update it and having to interpret your notes or whatever, it could be done a little streamlined. But the other interesting aspect that you brought up was, of course, the connectivity. And we saw, earlier in the year, or the end of 2023, we saw Maersk is fully linked, many of their ships with Starlink on the container side. I had on somebody very senior at Oldendorf, and he said he's experimenting with a handful of their ships on Starlink. So I think that should also help in the procurement process overall, obviously with your product, but then all the entire procurement process, which can be labor intensive. Maybe there is an opportunity to digitize.
Yeah, I agree. And because we also discussed with the shipping companies that we cooperate, we've seen this term. They would like to onboard also vessels. They would like the vessels to have a stable network. It's really interesting. And I truly believe that this could help generally the procurement, besides the daily RFQ, PO, etc. But all the procurement processes could be improved by the use of digitization and stable network in the vessel.
Yeah, I think you said it right. The stable network and having something that they can rely on, whether it's Starlink or some other, network where they can have this kind of almost constant connectivity to, whether it's to the office or to their home or to the internet or however you want to say it. I think is really important. And obviously procurement is a part of it, in terms of the day-to-day operations, in addition to voyage orders and other types of things as well.
Exactly. And I feel that even for the mariners, the crew, generally it would be really useful to have a connectivity. So during the route, they will be able also, for personal reasons, to communicate with their families, their friends. During COVID, I think this was have been a really negative experience for them. But it's really important to offer this connectivity so they can be always online and be in touch with their families and close people.
Absolutely. And then it gives companies like yours and others an interesting opportunity that maybe even 2-3 years ago really wasn't there because of the level of connectivity across the board. So for yourself, as you noted in 2017 when you came to the company, getting into shipping is interesting. You sit in Greece, so it's more of a high profile industry. What would you tell somebody who is interested in getting into shipping? I mean, why should they join our industry, or should you tell them to run away? What would you tell somebody, maybe somebody at university or somebody who is transitioning from a different role? Or maybe you guys have some positions open, sales, or even on the data development side. Why should they not join your company, but come into the maritime industry?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that the sector is pretty challenging, but really interesting. So from my side, I believe that there is more space in terms of technology and innovation in the shipping industry. The opportunities within the sector are still evolving due to digitization. For younger people starting their professional journey now, I think it's interesting to try and develop new solutions by always, of course, respecting the existing structure and processes of the companies. And I also feel that the diversity in terms of the different positions that someone could take within the shipping sector are considered a plus. the dynamic nature and the complexity of many of the aspects in shipping could be challenging, but I feel that this could also be rewarding as they lead people to constant development of new skills and knowledge. So I guess I would I would encourage them to join the sector.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's pretty fascinating. I think something that you talked a little bit about earlier was the sustainability and
Mhm.
I've talked to some folks who were at a company and they were talking about their role, and it was heavy on the sustainability, and they were really passionate about that part of the
Mhm.
industry as well. And I imagine with what you're doing just in the procurement process, there's opportunities actually for sustainability, whether it's reducing carbon footprint. Talk a little bit about how specifically in the procurement side sustainability is achieved or is part of the goals.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and I think it's really important from our side as we are working for procurement to implement relevant practices and to try to educate the users, both shipping companies and suppliers, regarding sustainability methods and practices. So, besides the IHM, the Inventory of Hazardous Material, a feature that we offer for our buyers, so they comply with the regulations of IMO. What we also do, and we're really happy to do it and offer it to the platform, is to the users using the platform, is that we have implemented some tags in the system, and we mentioned that some of the suppliers are sustainable, they have a sustainability tag. Because we are in close contact with them, we collect the relevant ISO certifications and, of course, impact or IMPA-Safe and many other documentation that could be useful. And we always mention this information in the profile. We're making sure the information is updated. So both the suppliers will feel that they feel that they comply with the relevant sustainability practices, and also the buyers know that they select someone, a supplier is sustainable, and they follow the same mentality regarding sustainability. So we feel that from our side, we're trying to be on this route. It's really important for us. And I feel that the next years we will also create many more modules regarding sustainability. It's one of the main things that we're discussing here.
What I see, especially from where you sit and from where the procurement is within the supply chain in general, especially as we saw recently with news about scope 3,
Mhm.
scope 3 pollution or emissions or however you want to say, crediting scope 3 that's going to be your wheelhouse, because pretty much everything that the procurement touches is going to be scope 3. It's going to be, how do my vendors get is it sustainable? Is it,
Mhm.
can we document this over time? Because as people start to really look at the true cost of moving, whether it's a finished good, whether it's crude oil or grain, and we haven't made the bread yet, or we haven't made the gas, the petrol or the jet fuel, but people are going to start, and I think at some point the procurement part is going to play a huge role in that, because they're going to say,
Mhm.
okay, if I have to get, like, how is this going to impact me, whether it's crewing, whether it's bunkering,
Mhm.
what's the full impact of moving that good, and that's all scope 3, and I think that gets a very interesting part of it as well.
Totally agree. This is our main goal too. We are moving in this direction, and we have many more things to come regarding sustainability.
Yeah, I'm sure that companies are going to be just knocking down your door and talking a little bit about that. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's such a huge part, and obviously it kind of goes in waves as we start to see. We're seeing now with the EU ETS, and then that'll be ramping up, and then even in 2025 we're going to see a new restriction for sulfur within the Mediterranean. That people will start paying attention to that soon. So as we get these waves of emissions and other regulatory requirements, it's certainly going to be more interesting. And I expect scope 3 to be not too far behind everybody else. So you guys are going to be sitting right in the middle of that, which should be interesting over time. As we get to wrap up this great conversation, question, and this is the $1 million question. So we talked about before the change. So what are you reading these days? What is, and again, I've always prefaced this by saying, maybe you have a young family at home and Chris, I can't read anything. I listen to my kids' audiobooks, or I listen to audiobooks, or we talked about podcasts, or we talk about other types of ways. What are you reading that's interesting now?
I would say that unfortunately, due to my program, it's hard to say that I'm committed to a book at this period. I usually read during vacations, where I select a nice novel, or I also enjoy biographies. Lately, I prefer listening to podcasts. Specifically, I would say news podcasts, because with so much going on in the world, I find it interesting and important to get information from different sources, so I can be informed about anything and what's happening around us. So I would say I'm not reading, but I hear lots of things, and getting information, it's important for me to be informed. We don't have a lot of time, so podcasts could help with this.
What is your go-to podcast? And you don't have to say this one, don't worry about it. But what is your go-to news? What is your go-to news podcast?
I hear different things. I might hear from Greek news podcasts to The Daily or Today Explained, or everything that has to do with the global news. So I will go whatever I find interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, I find that actually I'm a little bit opposite. I find that you get so much saturation with news. I have a couple of good news feeds set up that I feel if I get too much news, every now and again, I'll do a deep dive into a podcast. I prefer my podcast to be mostly fiction, actually. I like to listen to fiction podcasts just because it's completely out there. I stumbled across a podcast, and I mentioned to some of my colleagues internally, and I'm not kidding you. It's called Murder in HR. Okay. And it's a comedy.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not kidding when I said this. I literally fell off my chair when I heard this. It's set at a SaaS company, right? That sells maritime software.
Wow.
It's really funny because they have to use like nautical jargon, like ahoy and all this other. So like I heard this, they're like, oh, we sell, and it's like some fictitious thing, but it's one of the funniest things, because it's like, I joked around with my HR group. They're like, oh my gosh, we are going to so listen to this. It sounds like us, right? Except for the murder part. Not my company, no murder.
Yeah, no. This is going to be my next favorite podcast.
Yeah, you should listen to it. It's quick. Most of them are less than 20 minutes. There's a couple of longer ones. Most are like 15 to 20. And it's all done. The first season's all done. So you could binge listen to it on a couple of drives home, or maybe if you're out for a walk or something. It's fascinating, and it's kind of funny, especially working in our business, because we work in the maritime, technology business, which is really, really hysterical. So, Angeliki, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I enjoyed listening to kind of the procurement process, what you guys are doing at Procureship, and really kind of your takeaway, especially with, I found super interesting just talking about, the reaction of people, especially with AI and MI. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having us.